Leaving corporate America sort of forced me to rethink everything. So I'm doing something I've never done before. I'm walking into a brand new job as my full AuDHD self, and that's both terrifying and exciting. Hi, I'm Brett, the Audi Boss, and on this channel we talk about ADHD and autism in the workplace. I'm Brett. I have over 12 years of leadership training and experience, and I happen to have autism and ADHD, or AuDHD. I used to start every new job fully masked, even before I knew what being masked was, or even what it meant, or even that I was doing it unintentionally. As I would enter that new role, that new job, I would spend those first few weeks, those first few months, just trying to get the lay of the land, trying to understand how all the systems worked, trying to understand who did what, who I needed to know, who I needed to talk to, who I could trust, who I couldn't trust, who I should listen to, who I shouldn't listen to. This sort of model would sort of repeat. I kind of learned it in school. I used to switch schools a lot as a kid, and that taught me a lot of skills that I would then take into adult life. I would always mask up. I wouldn't really reveal too much about myself, and I would sort of cherry pick when I wanted to sort of share little parts of myself, or I would kind of, just sort of ask a lot of questions. And that's the best time to ask most of those questions because you're sort of new and you're figuring things out. As I would go along, I would start to sort of build the sort of version of myself I needed to be for that job, for that role. Again, if you've ever watched Doctor Who, this is how I would regenerate into the person that I wanted to be for that specific job. And that always served me very well. But then in my last job, a few years ago, I was late diagnosed with autism and ADHD, and I started to rethink everything about who I was, everything about how I managed, everything about the kind of ways that I would approach roles and jobs and things. What does my ADHD need? What does my autism need? How does the push and pull of autism and ADHD show up in how I work every day? And then more importantly, how does it show up in the recovery? And that's a big part. The recovery itself is critical for how I rest, recover, and come back the next day, the next week. So this is the first time that I'm walking into a brand new job, fully aware of my autism and my ADHD, fully aware of what ADHD needs and where ADHD trips me up, what autism needs and where autism trips me up, but also not having to hide those parts of myself. The people that I'm working for now, it's a neurodivergent group. They all know I'm neurodivergent. That's why they hired me. It's a part of the job, and I'm incredibly privileged to be able to walk into this job to both work on neurodivergent topics, but also be fully my neurodivergent self. And that's both scary. I've never been able to be that open and honest and raw before. And it's also exhilarating, because it allows me to not have to hide those parts of myself. It allows me to not have to think through the strategies, the hoops, the different things that I would need to do to hide things. I can say, oh, you know what? That's where my ADHD needs this thing. Or, oh, my autism doesn't like that. It's a part of the conversation. It's a part of how we talk about how each of us need to work and how each of us need to have our needs met. And that's amazing. I've never had that before. That is a gift, and I recognize that is a huge privilege that not a lot of people have, and I'm very, very, very lucky to have that. It's also making me stop and think about, how does ADHD show up for me at work? And how does autism show up for me at work? And where does ADHD get in the way, and where does autism get in the way? Because I think more often than not, ADHD tends to cause a lot more problems than autism does. I've noticed that. ADHD really thrives on chaos and disorganization. And then for me, autism would then come in and make sense of all of that. Autism really enjoyed sort of putting order around those things in the different jobs that I would go to. And then specifically over the years, previous to this job, the last 2-3 jobs that I had, we really sort of made that our routine. Autism and ADHD made that chaos and order, push-pull, the routine of how we would go into a job or the jobs that we would look for. The early part of my career was all broadcast journalism. There was chaos and deadlines every single day. That was just a part of the job. And autism would put order around those things as best it could. And I thrived in those environments because of how I needed things. But it also burned me out really, really hard. And it made me exhausted at the end of every day and every week. And I needed a lot of recovery time because of those things, which is how I ended up in corporate America. I left those broadcast journalism jobs, and I went into corporate thinking that the structure there would give me more relief and more rest. Except I brought with me all those things that I love doing in the news world, the deadlines, the adrenaline, the chaos. And I brought those things with me, but I brought them in a structured and organized way and sort of reinvented those things as I led new teams inside the corporate structure that I was in. And that was a blessing and a curse. So what kind of an employee do I want to be now? How do I want to have my needs met? Well, the only way I can kind of figure out how to get my needs met is I've got to go back through the last few jobs and figure out where I was and was not getting those needs met. Well, I have to review everything before that, the things I need to undo and the things I need to carry with me. So what do I miss and what do I need again? I love learning new things. That's where ADHD kind of comes in. I need the sparks of something new, new creative energies, new creative environments, new creative ideas. I like ideas. I like kind of getting in there. I can be an idea machine for my ADHD, but it has to more often than not be on a topic in an area that I want to pump out ideas on. Now, that's not always the case. I could be working on something that I'm like, oof, that's really boring. And if I hit that boredom window, then I've really lost my steam and I need another spark to get me going again. Sometimes that spark comes in the form of working with really smart and clever colleagues, people who can kind of energize me when we start going around the room and everybody starts bouncing off ideas. But I love collaboration. I love thinking out loud because I'm a verbal processor, but I love working with teams. I love working with my colleagues. I love seeing everybody's strengths around the table and figuring out where people have really great ideas and, where we can build ideas on top of each other to make something bigger and better and bolder, but also achievable and manageable. It's fun for me. That really lifts me up to think about things like that, to think about strategy and build and create and all those things. And then for us to then all split and go do the parts of that building and that creating that we need to do in our own space. And then I would love to just hyper focus on one of those projects, especially one of those projects that I really was into and I really loved, and I could just go and do that thing for however many hours or things that I wanted to do. The higher I moved up in my career, though, the less I was able to do that because it became more about going to meetings and being a manager and sort of leading teams and talking about budgets and things like that. And the only reason, spoiler alert, I became a boss and a manager and a leader in the first place was because I wanted to have my ideas come to life. I wanted to build teams where we could do these big, bold, amazing ideas. The only way I could get those things done was to become a manager so that I could clear the barriers for the team to get our ideas met and to go do these amazing, incredible things that we wanted to do and these ideas that we want to get done. I could only do that as a boss and a manager and a leader where I could sort of speak to the needs of those many people that were trying to be creative and do all those amazing things. That's how I became a manager. I didn't intend to, it just sort of became that way. I have a love-hate relationship when it comes to meetings. I like a productive meeting. I like a working meeting. I like a meeting where we get something done, where we come out of that meeting where there's been collaboration, we come out of that meeting with something done, and we can look back at that and go, that was a great use of time. That was a great meeting. We got so much done in that meeting. I don't like meetings where we're all just looking at slides or things that could have been an email, or we're just talking for the sake of talking, or we're listening for the sake of listening, or it's just sort of droning on. I like interactivity. I like where I can kind of think and express and sort of, do things. The last, 7 to 10 years were all based in meetings. It was start my meetings at 8:30 in the morning and meetings straight through to the end of the day. That kind of became my routine. It became my sort of normal way of life. So when I no longer had that job, I was really lost not having those meetings every day. Because it wasn't just that those were meetings where we would or wouldn't get things done. Those meetings were also my community. Those meetings where even when it was just my team or the crew that I worked with the most, I would get my community needs met through those meetings. Because a lot of those people were my friends. They were people that I hired. They were people that I worked closely with. They were people that I knew very, very well. And they're friends now. They're still continuing to be friends outside of work and on this side of not having that job anymore. But I was invested in those relationships and those friendships for 13 years. And now not seeing them every day is kind of sad. And that's been a huge adjustment for me, is to not having that community every day, not having those communities, those conversations, catching up with people, even when it's just for a few minutes at a time, and then getting into work and then having fun with each other as we work and we build and we just, enjoy being around one another as we do these projects and these jobs. That's been a really hard adjustment, not having that community anymore. And I'm building that now with my new job, but it's a smaller group. Everybody's in different parts of the world. We don't have the same volume of meetings. We don't need the same volume of meetings at this job. It's a very different industry. So it's just not going to be something that I totally see recreating. So I have to figure out a way to get my community needs met in a way that works for my autism and ADHD. Now here's the thing about that. I would get my community needs met at work, but when my colleagues or my friends would want to go do something outside of work, hey, come to this party, go out for a drink or something like that, I didn't know what to do because of my autistic self. I didn't know how to exist outside of the work atmosphere, the work world I didn't know how to be a person outside of work, outside of that job, outside of that role. It's a part of masking to some degree for me, because it's like, you got to be careful. But especially as I was the boss in most of those situations and most of those roles, I have to be really careful about how I act in those moments, how I carry myself, how I show up, constantly strategizing, thinking about that too, which was another layer of masking. So I don't miss that part, because now I can go have a drink with those people, with my friends, and I can, let loose and unmask a little bit more, which I couldn't do before, which is nice. It's a little harder to come by getting together with everybody without the structure of work anymore. So now I'm trying to be more aware of where ADHD shows up, where autism shows up, where ADHD needs sparks of creativity, sparks of dopamine or adrenaline or different things like that, and where autism needs more routines. And I have the structure now and the space to let autism and ADHD both have their needs met in a way that works for my full AuDHD self, which I've never had before. And it's both fascinating to me and a little scary, because I'll have these moments where I feel like I should be doing something, or I should be doing this, or I should be doing that. But a lot of those rules, very rigid rules, came from corporate and came from the corporate structure that was built for a neurotypical brain and not for my AuDHD brain. So there's a lot of times in the last couple of months in this new job where I've had to sort of check myself and say, no, that's a rigid rule. That's a rigid corporate rule. That's a rigid corporate rule that was for a neurotypical brain. It's also giving me perspective when I talk to people who are still in those structures about, hey, here's a small strategy, here's a tip, something that you can do to undo some of those things, But again, when we work together to have everybody's needs met, and we're doing that in a collaborative way so that we can all grow together and work towards a shared goal and a shared project and a shared demand and all those different things, we can all both get our needs met and get the work done at the same time. And I'm seeing that in real time now. But it's proving to me it can work. It's proving to me that we really do need to change corporate America so that we can work towards those things for more AuDHD, more neurodivergent employees. When we honor our neurodivergent selves and our neurodivergent needs, that we can be more successful. And again, that's not easy for everybody to do. I still keep a little bit of a mask up so that I am professional. I truly believe you have to mask at work to some degree. I truly believe you have to stay professional, because if you're fully unmasked at work, I don't know if that's what everybody actually needs or wants. So that's what I'm sitting with. If you've been with me in my journey since I lost my last job, and you've been with me in this journey as I figure out the next wave of my career, this is just sort of a way to sort of give you an update that I have landed in a new job. I'm really happy with what I'm doing, and it's really exciting. And right now, that's been the scariest part for my autism, is building new routines that make my autism feel safe, because I had so many careers of chaos that autism needed to organize, and I don't have to do that now. So a lot of times autism's like, what are we doing? And autism also misses all those meetings of the schedule every day. So autism's a little curious about that too. I mean, it's all me. It's weird to say autism is like it's a other person living in my head. But thanks for watching. I hope some of this has been helpful and useful in some capacity. If it has, please like and subscribe. It really does help the channel grow. And while you're here, let me know in the comments below if there's an accommodation or something that works for you. How do you have your needs met? How do you do that? I'm be curious to hear about that. I'm also curious if you have a topic or something that you'd like for me to cover on the channel, if there's something in the workplace that you'd like for me to talk more about. Let me know down in the comments below if there's a topic or something you'd like to hear more about. And if you'd rather listen to these instead of watch these as videos, well, I have that too. There's a podcast of the Audi Boss out there. Be sure to check that out wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for watching.